Hello, I hope you can all see us. Yep, I'm here now. I've got Stuart McCarthy with me. All right, I just thought we'd pop in. I hope everyone is having a fantastic Wednesday. I've changed things around, so I'm going to rely on you folks in chat to tell me if the audio's okay and if the stream's going okay. We're going to try and avoid using the S word. So for this stream, we're just going to say Veterans Royal Commission, but you all know what we're talking about. So I just thought I'd say hello. I hope you're all having a terrific week so far. We are halfway through, heading towards Friday. Welcome back to my channel. As always, if it's your first time visiting, well, hello there. Thank you so much for stopping by and spending your valuable time at our little corner of YouTube. I appreciate it very, very much. I just thought I'd say g'day to everyone. We had Carl in here last night. He was keen as anything, keen as mustard. Stickman. You've actually got a really valid point there, Stickman, and I think you and I are on the same page about that, and I will get to that. Hi, Cuppy. Hey, Nicole King. I'm really glad you could be here. We've got Kaz, of course. It's always great to have you here. Thank you for helping me figure out some audio last night. And we've got Breddy here. You'll see Breddy and Keely are in blue as moderators today. Not anticipating any trouble, but just behave yourselves, please, because we have a special guest who has kindly come to our side of the tracks for today. So, g'day, Keely. Hi, Gav. Nice to see you here. G'day, JP. And everybody else. Jody, it's lovely to have you here. Gold Star Mother. Hi, John. It's nice to see you here. Okay, so I do really very much appreciate you all being here. And if you're not having a great week, I'm really, really sorry. Let's spend some quality time together. In case anyone is wondering why I have an L plate hanging in the background, it's because I'm a learner streamer and it's not coming off until I reach 500 subs. I don't make the rules, okay? Take it up with Kaz if you've got a problem with that. Welcome to a very special stream at the special time with my very special guest, retired ADF Major Stuart McCarthy, tireless advocate for veterans and civilians with disabilities. Stuart served in the Australian Army for 28 years, including 6 operational deployments. His service included deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, peacekeeping in Africa and Papua New Guinea, disaster relief operations in the Asia Pacific. He is one of the almost 3,000 subjects involved in the Army's notorious tefenaquine and mefloquine anti-malarial drug trials, which I know a lot of you in the chat also were, in Bougainville and East Timor at the turn of this century. So since 2015, while still serving in the Army, Stuart has publicly campaigned for a royal commission to examine institutionalised medical abuse against ADF personnel, testifying to numerous parliamentary inquiries and authoring papers on the toxic effects of quinoline anti-malarials. He was medically discharged from the Army in 2017 while undergoing rehabilitation for an acquired brain injury, which I know is something a lot of you also have struggled with. He's helped design rehabilitation and outreach programs for some of Australia's most seriously ill, disabled veterans and their families. And that care and concern that Stuart has for those families is what makes him one of my favourite friends. So welcome to our little smoko, Stuart. I really appreciate you joining us.
Oh, it's really good to be here, Loren. Good morning to you. Good morning to your followers. Yeah, we've been talking about a lot of these things for about, I think it's about 5 or 6 years now on and off, and I've only just noticed your channel and caught up yesterday with some of your previous streams, which is really good stuff. So well done to you and
thank you.
And what you've been doing, and yeah, really looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, I haven't been streaming long.
Hearing from many of your followers there on your chat.
Yep, exactly. And I think it's great that you are willing to take questions too, because a lot of folk have questions about this subject. But before we begin, I actually heard a rumor about you. I was wondering if you could debunk it. I heard that you flunked some pilot training as a lieutenant for taking selfies while flying aerobatics over your girlfriend's house.
Have you hacked my phone?
I don't know. The grapevine's pretty good.
No. Actually, the best piece of legal advice I've ever been given is deny. It's partly true. I'll fess up to that. It's
okay.
Partly true.
All right. So that sounds like it sounds like your sort of shenanigans. Okay.
Busted.
Yeah.
I did do pilot training, and I did flunk out a pilot's course, but no, that lasted a bit.
It wasn't anything that glamorous, right? Okay. Today, I wanted to chat with you all about the forthcoming Royal Commission. Now, Stuart is the most knowledgeable person I know on this subject, so it seemed only logical that I would ask him to join us and explain in the simplest of terms, if you can please, Stuart, the questions that I have. Considering the enormous size of the push for this Royal Commission for a number of years, ScoMo seemed staunch and resistant to any suggestion of even entertaining a Royal Commission. So when ScoMo finally made his announcement, that was, a month ago, what do you think finally convinced him to make that call?
Yeah, this is really interesting, and this is where you need to understand. I mean, this is a big part of my learning curve, right? Has been the politics. So not just the politics between the parties, but also I've learned a lot about the politics at play within the political parties. So you need to understand all the background to sort of where we've come from, how we've got here, which we don't really have time to go into, but I know a lot of your followers will have at least a basic understanding of it.
Yep.
So over the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years, a lot of individuals like myself, a lot of advocacy groups have all been sort of pushing for a Royal Commission of some flavour to look into all the different problems that we encounter. And that was a little bit disjointed, and the governments were sort of quite easily able to hold that at bay. About 2.5 years ago is where we had Julianne Finney and a group of the other mothers who've been affected by their personal losses of their sons, daughters, other family members. Julianne started a petition, which we know now has got more than 400,000 signatures on it. And her lobbying really kicked into gear about 2 years ago. And about 18 months ago, she approached the Prime Minister in Parliament, one of her numerous trips down there, got, through her petition, got this on the agenda. And then over the summer, 18 months ago, the Prime Minister committed to consider doing this Royal Commission.
Yeah.
And then he came back after that sort of bushfire season and made this, what I call, a pretty half-baked announcement about the National Commissioner. So we'll come back to that if we
because that's
an important part of this.
Yeah, I actually have questions about that.
Yeah. So anyway, over the last 18 months, obviously we've had the pandemic, and we've had a whole bunch of other political issues, in the limelight, which have, in one sense, they've kind of taken some attention away from the campaign.
Yep.
But in another sense, it's allowed the veterans community to really rally and get behind this push and do it in a much more organised way.
Yep.
And a big part of that has been working behind the scenes. So one thing I've always been saying to people is it's really important that you go and talk to your member of parliament or your senators.
Yep.
They've got to know that you are there. They've got to know that this is what you want. And so when they go to Canberra, spend time in Canberra in Parliament House and so on, they know that when these things are being discussed, and there's debates over how the Prime Minister or the government should respond, they know that if they don't do the right thing, they're going to be held to account by their constituents back in their
exactly.
So that's the sort of thing that's been happening for a long time.
Yep.
And so if we come to, the here and now, or at least, a month or so ago, to get back to your question,
Yep.
there's been some really interesting political dynamics, right, in the last few months.
Yeah.
One of those. Now we know there was a big reshuffle in cabinet, or not a big one, but a reshuffle in, for example, the Minister for Defence was moved into another portfolio due, because of one of the big controversies in Parliament House.
Yep.
Now, Peter Dutton he became the Minister for Defence. That was about 3 months ago, thereabouts. I forget the exact date. Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff about Peter Dutton. He's been, from what I understand, he's been someone who's been really keen to be the Minister for Defence for quite some time.
Yep.
But he's come into that job without a lot of the baggage that other ministers have. So his background, back in the day, he's a retired Queensland police officer. So he doesn't have that baggage of being like a former senior officer, and doesn't have all the connections and the biases and so on.
Yeah, look,
so he's basically come in with a clean slate.
Yeah, exactly. To be honest with you, he's popular around here. To be honest with you, he's becoming pretty popular, around here. No matter what side of politics you're on, he seems to be doing his own thing, making his own decisions, even if they're unpopular with the people he works with.
Exactly. So even a little bit more background. So even before we get to the actual Royal Commission, I'll give you some examples of the sort of things he's doing. And these are public. There's no big secret about this. So one of the first things that he did when he became the minister. Now, a lot of your followers will have been following the Brereton inquiry into the alleged war crimes that occurred in Afghanistan. Now, one of the main responses that came from the Chief of the Defence Force and government in response to those findings was their decision to remove the meritorious unit citation from the Special Operations Task Group and the 3,000 or so people who had served in SOTG during Afghanistan. Now, as you will know, and your followers will know, that was hugely controversial.
Yes.
And in my personal opinion, it was just a dumb decision. It was just a knee-jerk decision. Now, one of the things that, one of the first things that Peter Dutton did was to reverse that decision. He said, no, this is just not the right thing. So he went back to the Chief of the Defence Force and said, no, I'm not going to support this. I'm going to overturn it. So that's just one example, right? And there've been a few other little things like that. So even more recently, one of the things that he did in his ministerial office was he literally put a broom through the place.
Yeah, I remember seeing you make a Facebook post about that, actually.
Yeah. So let me tell you specifically what happened. So if you go into the ministerial offices of any of the the cabinet ministers in Parliament House, they've got a really big staff, and that's important. And because they've got a whole bunch of issues they've got to deal with on a daily basis. Now, in the Minister for Defence's office, they've got something like, or traditionally they've had something like a dozen or thereabouts uniformed officers from the Defence Force sitting in that office, either as liaison officers or they're permanently sitting there as advisors.
Right.
Now, that's a big problem. That's been a really big problem because, and I'll even give you some examples without going into too much detail.
Yep.
There's been a number of occasions where people have written to the minister, as a member of the public, and they might be a family member or a veteran themselves, and they'll have a really serious complaint, right, that needs to be addressed at that level of the ministerial level. So they've written to the minister, and because there's a huge amount of correspondence that comes into a minister's office, they need to be farmed out to the relevant staff. Now, the problem has been, if you have uniformed officers from the Defence Force, they'll get a hold of a complaint like that, they'll keep it away from the minister's attention. They'll refer it
Oh,
into,
really?
the defence bureaucracy, and whatever response comes back just bounces back. It just comes back with, oh no, this is not a problem, sweep it under the carpet, or
Yep.
go and talk to Open Arms, just ridiculous sort of stuff. So what Peter Dutton has done already is he put a broom through all that, and so I think he's got an aide de camp, so an ADC, to do the ceremonial stuff, and I think from what I read the other day, he's got 2 uniform advisors, and that's probably about right.
Yep.
So his advice is coming from the people who work for him, and if he needs to address some of these more serious problems within the Defence Force, he's not getting information filtered out by
Yep.
people who are compromised, simply by the fact that they're senior officers in the Defence Force.
Yep.
So these are the sort of things that he's done already. So these are really, really good signs, right? So let me give you my take. This is not necessarily factual, but it's just my take and my impression of.
That's why we invited you.
He brought about or helped to bring about the Royal Commission. So the first couple of months this year were pretty quiet as far as the public campaigning. We kept working as a sort of below the radar a little bit, doing our lobbying, speaking to politicians, bringing our ideas together, stuff like that. But we sort of kept an eye on. You got to keep your eye on the news and what politicians are saying. They get caught up in a lot of those controversies which we know about. Now, what I noticed was a month ago, and this was, I think from memory, this was on a Monday morning. One of the things that Peter Dutton does is he does a regular chat on 2GB. So it's it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, talkback stations in the country, and it covers most of metropolitan Sydney. And someone said to me, hey, have a listen to what Peter Dutton says each week on the show. So I tuned in Monday morning. This is around about 8 a.m., so your morning drive time, commute time. This is what people listen to in the car as they're going to work. And Peter Dutton was interviewed, as he normally is, as part of his kind of media engagements. And the announcer sort of asked him some topical stuff about what was happening in the defence portfolio, and he threw a little bit of a teaser question. He said, "Okay, so what when are we going to hear from the Prime Minister about this Royal Commission?" And in his very measured kind of Peter Dutton type way, he said, "Oh, I suspect we might hear the Prime Minister make some announcement in due course." All very, measured, not sort of in your face stuff. And I thought, okay, well, this will be interesting. And I thought, okay, maybe we might hear something within the next couple of weeks. Who knows? Anyway, 2 hours later, we start to get news flashes on the TV news channels, on social media, and so on. The Prime Minister will be making an announcement about the Veterans Royal Commission at 12:30 p.m. this afternoon. And I thought, whoa. So
I remember.
This is my take on this stuff. This is not factual. This just means someone who's been close to this and watching it for a long time.
Yep. Well, it seems to be the only thing that changed. It seemed to be the only thing that had changed.
Background too is there has been murmurings about Peter Dutton potentially expressing some interest in the leadership of the Liberal National Party. So when you hear those murmurings, where there's smoke, there's fire, who knows? Yeah,
frankly, we don't care. As long as he's doing a good job, we don't care.
Yeah, exactly. So what I suspect might have happened is, that was just another little signal. Excuse me. That was just another little signal to the Prime Minister and the people close to him. Hey, maybe we want to get on top of this now, because if we don't, possibly there might be some political consequences.
Yep.
So my take on this is that firstly, I think regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, personally, I think Peter Dutton is a good person to be having in that job at the right time.
Yep, same.
And I think he's been pretty influential in bringing this about. So
Yep.
I think he had a key role to play in forcing the Prime Minister's hand to actually make that announcement.
And you're not alone. That is actually sort of word on the street, what most people believe. And I saw in ScoMo's press conference announcing the Royal Commission that he made a comment about the Royal Commission not having the powers to investigate criminal or civil wrongdoing by senior ADF officers. What the heck is that about? Can you explain that?
Yeah, this is something that myself and a number of other people picked up on straight away. So I was glued to the television when the Prime Minister did his big sort of press conference making this announcement, and then I even went back to read the transcript. So he made his big sort of long rambling preamble thing, and then said, "Yeah, we're going to have this Royal Commission," which I thought was great. And then he gave a few little clues in his speech, and the impression I got straight away was, okay, great, we're going to have a Royal Commission, but it's going to be a bit of an exercise in soft pedaling. We care about veterans. We're making this big announcement, but the subtext, the actual substance of what he was saying was, there's some administrative stuff. Veterans Affairs isn't working very well. Mental health, blah blah blah. But in the middle of that, he said, almost the exact words that he said there. He announced that there'd be a list of themes.
Yep.
He posted like a draft sort of terms of reference for his take on what the Royal Commission should be. But then he said almost exact words that you said, and I thought, right, so that this is his position. This is where he's going with this. So these are the things that we need to get on top of. So now just going back a little bit, there was a Senate inquiry last year into this National Commission thing, which we'll talk about a bit later. But I wrote a submission to that, and I included in my submission, I said, okay, well, let's get a bit ahead of the game here. And I said, okay, well, if I was to announce a Royal Commission, what would it look into? So what I did, having had all these discussions with a whole bunch of people for a long period of time, I actually wrote a proposed terms of reference. It was about like 6 pages long. And one of the things the key things I identified in there was that the Royal Commission would be empowered, explicitly to look into exactly that thing, high level civil and criminal wrongdoing. It will be able to make findings into that sort of wrongdoing, and it would then be able to refer any evidence that they found to the appropriate authorities, whether they be prosecutors or regulatory authorities or whatever. And this is really important. This is one of the things that I've been banging on about for a long time, and a number of other people have been banging on about for a long time. So the kind of narrative about this Royal Commission for a long time has been, I touched on this a second ago. So we all know that the Department of Veterans Affairs is dysfunctional and it's not working.
Yep.
We all know that claims processing times are a massive problem. We all know that, the ability for people to access, various services, not just within Veterans Affairs, but, a lot of the more specialist services is a huge problem. That's all. These things are all a given. Right?
Yep.
So I think anyone who started a Royal Commission which left that stuff out, they'd just be laughed at. Wouldn't pass the pub test.
Yep.
But here's where I'm coming from, and here's where a number of us are coming from. All of these problems go a lot deeper. So when you look into Veterans Affairs, when you look into the Defence Force, and when you look at a lot of these other institutions, there is serious wrongdoing at play. So, for example, a lot of the abuse that goes on in the Defence Force, put yourself in this scenario where you're either the victim of abuse or you're someone close to the victim of abuse.
Yep.
You make a complaint. Typically, the way that these organisations respond is they'll come back with a really half-baked response, which looks like they've dealt with the problem, but diverts attention from, a senior officer or
Right.
a senior official,
Yeah.
which has been either directly implicated in the complaint or they've done something to try and cover things up, right? So without dealing with that high level misconduct, all we're going to do is come up with some kind of whitewash exercise, which looks like it's kind of solving the problems, but you're still going to have this high level culture of, impunity. So people, the senior officials that do this stuff, there's not going to be any accountability for them.
Yeah.
Now, the Royal Commissions that have been done properly, and one of the better ones I can think of in the not too distant past was the Royal Commission into trade unions,
Right.
about 6 or 7 years ago, and that's exactly what it did. So they were empowered and resourced to look into that misconduct. They made findings. They're not a court, so they can't say you're guilty or not guilty of a crime. But what they do is they make findings, and then they refer that evidence to whether it's the police or regulatory bodies or public prosecutors, and that's what they did. That's what they did for that Royal Commission. So this is really important. Really important aspect of what this Royal Commission needs to do, and so what I picked up on, and a number of us picked up on when we heard the Prime Minister say that stuff, we thought, right. So this is going to be another soft peddling exercise.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what a lot of us have been focusing on, during this sort of
and we want to
consultation
avoid that. We want to avoid that because we want real solutions to the problem.
Yeah.
We don't want to put a Band-Aid on an amputated limb. It needs to actually, if we're going to do this once, we want to do it properly. Now, since Scotty from Marketing's announcement, there's been a consultation process for the terms of reference. Can you explain how that's been worked?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when the Prime Minister made his announcement a month ago, he said, okay, we're going to have a 1-month consultation period. Here's where you can send submissions on what you think should be included in the terms of reference. So in one sense, that's a really good thing. So full marks, rather than just making an announcement saying, this is terms of reference, take it or leave it, this is how it's going to be done. I'll give him a big tick for having a consultation period. That's really, really good. But there's been massive problems with how that consultation process has been run. One of the major dramas, which I've been very critical of right from the start, is that they put this consultation process in the hands of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
I have an issue with that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And specifically, they put the Minister for Veterans Affairs, Darren Chester, in the lead for that process. So I've been really publicly critical of that, as have a number of other people. And the reason for this is, now again, going back to what I was saying before, a lot of the submissions would have just focused on those sort of themes about, how dysfunctional Veterans Affairs is. And that's all good stuff. And that's very relevant and very legitimate. But my concern is that will kind of fall into this sort of soft peddling narrative. Now, put yourself in the shoes, and I know a lot of people who fall exactly into this category. Let's say you're an abuse survivor.
Yep.
Let's say you're someone who's experienced medical abuse. Let's say you're someone like me or some of your other followers who've experienced these drug trials, a lot of the complex stuff that goes along with that. You're a witness to fraud, or cover-ups, or serious wrongdoing, which has had some involvement from Veterans Affairs. And let's say you made a submission on the term, what you think should be in the terms of reference, and you've included background on your personal circumstances. That's really problematic.
Yep.
There's already, it goes beyond a conflict of interest, and it goes into issues of privacy and your well-being as an abuse survivor.
Yep.
And I know that one of the things that we'll come back in if we get a chance to talk a bit about this sort of what they've called the Royal Commission Task Force.
That was my next question. Yeah.
Which has been handling. We'll go into that, but I'll give you some examples of, or one example of how badly this consultation process has gone off track. So a number of people made these submissions to the Veterans Affairs website and included some of their personal history and their personal background. And they've done that in good faith, right? They've said, okay, well, I'm going to have my say on what I think should be in the terms of reference. But they've assumed that their personal information would be used only for that purpose.
Yeah.
And would be, kept confidential for any other reason. Next minute, they've had an email from another part of the Veterans Affairs Department, which is saying, oh, look, we've received your contact details because you made a submission on the terms of reference. We're contacting you because, we want to talk to you about, what other support might be available.
Oh my gosh.
Because we think this will have a bearing on your future business with the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Why?
And it's just it is just alarm bells are ringing.
Yeah, that's all kinds of wrong. Yeah, that's all.
So that's this consultation process has had all these problems. So we, partly as a result of our criticisms in the media, they then said, okay, well, you can also make a submission directly to the Attorney General, and they also announced publicly that any individual submission that you send to that Veterans Affairs email address, it's not going to be filtered out. It'll go straight.
Right. So people should be aware of that.
Yeah. So look, I've been a big critic of that process.
Yeah.
But if you've made a submission, whether it's to the DVA email address or to the Attorney General, I'm pretty confident. I'm more confident now than I was a few weeks ago that there's not going to be sort of that filtering.
Yep.
But I'm still concerned that it's Darren Chester who is taking the lead.
Same
in this.
Yep.
Now he's my impression. I've met him a few times, so this is by no means a personal attack on this guy.
He's been given a fair go.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's a good bloke. He wants to do the right thing, but he's got to. So when we were talking a minute ago about the staff in a minister's office and the lengths that Peter Dutton's already gone to sort of put a broom through his staff. Darren Chester's got that same problem. So he relies so heavily on his staff from DVA. I know for a fact they filter this stuff out so he doesn't see it. And so he hasn't, he's been in that job for a couple of years, and I honestly believe he wants to do the right thing.
Yeah, then they all need to get brooms out.
Because of the advice that he's been getting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
They need to follow Dutton's lead.
Publicly, hey, we need to take this out of the hands of the Veterans Affairs Minister and put it in someone else's hands.
Yep.
Didn't go very far, but anyway, that kind of brings us to where we are now. That consultation process.
Yep, exactly. Because
on Friday, and I actually made I did my own submission, but I was involved in another big one, which we can talk about.
Yeah, I actually have some questions about that. But I've heard bits and pieces on the grapevine about this DVA Royal Commission task force. And I was wondering, who are they and how do they fit into the consultation process?
Yeah, exactly. So some time ago, DVA set up this beast called a Royal Commission Task Force within the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I hadn't paid a lot. I knew it was there, but I hadn't paid a lot of attention to it until the last sort of month or so. And some of what they're doing is probably pretty legit. Like you've actually got to have staff that facilitate going through documents and getting those to a Royal Commission. Now, the reason they set it up a little while ago was there's some other Royal Commissions that have been taking place,
right,
which are tied into some of the stuff that Veterans Affairs does. So there's the aged care one, and then now there's the Disability Royal Commission. It's been going on for some time.
Yep.
So I suspect they set that up partly to assist the flow of information to those two Royal Commissions. But no, there's no question in my mind they would have had a pretty fair idea. The Veterans Royal Commission was coming down the pipeline, and so they had to sort of ramp something up to get their ducks in a row, so to speak. So in one sense, it's pretty legit. I don't have an issue with them having the right staff in there to do that. However, one thing we pieced together over the last month is they've got the first assistant secretary, so a very senior public servant heading this thing up, and her background's really weird. So her background, she's gone in and out of defence and more recently into veteran affairs. She's an accountant, and her background is in equipment disposals. So in the ADF, they've got this flow of equipment, old used equipment they continually get rid of. That was her background. This is the sort of stuff she was doing in defence. So she doesn't have the sort of background you might expect to see. Doesn't add up.
That just doesn't make instill me with confidence that she's sort of qualified to play a productive role in this.
No, that's right. And then another person I've only just discovered in there over the last 10 days or so, they've parachuted someone else in there who's a communications officer, right? So someone, a PR, like a spin doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And this spin doctor is actually the spouse of a senior Defence Force officer.
Oh, for real?
Again, and that when you see this stuff, alarm bells.
Yeah, I get nepotism alarm bells going.
The narrative and the themes that are coming out of the Veterans Affairs Department about what I'm calling soft peddling, and the Royal Commission's going to look into administrative stuff, and then the way that they respond to the various media stories. There's some pretty cynical stuff has come out of this, and it's pretty complicated. We don't have time to go into much detail, but so a lot of the focus, a lot of the discussion that you hear from people like myself, has been advocating for abuse survivors. People have been subjected to really horrible things.
Yeah,
and these are the people who can't get the help that they need.
Yep.
Which is going to prevent them from that worst case scenario. Right?
Yep, exactly.
And my take on their commentary, their narrative, their messaging has been to try and marginalise those voices. So they've gone and they've held these consultation sessions, lots of group hug, selfies, photos. Aren't we looking after these people? But then when you dig a bit deeper, it's been pretty cynical stuff. Very cynical
exactly.
Stuff.
And it's really difficult.
And I've even gone as far on some. You might have seen some of my social media posts. I've even called them the propaganda section.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite tweets. Because it's like, to me, I don't understand why they're not consulting with folks who have been directly affected with this, folks who have that actual experience in and could actually bring something to the table about what it looks like at the grassroots of this problem.
Exactly.
Now, I know you were involved in, we talked about it a little bit before, Julianne Finney's expert panel, which briefed politicians in Parliament House on the 13th of May. Can you tell us any more about how that went?
Yeah, definitely. So again, just a little bit of background first. So this is where Julianne Finney fits into this, and this is really important because, as you know, I'm really passionate about democratic process.
Yep.
And I said before how important it is for everyone to talk to their own MPs and senators. This is really important to understand first. So, a lot of us have been, pushing for this Royal Commission from different angles for a long time, but Julianne Finney's petition, which she started, 2.5 years ago, which now has 400,000 signatures, it's the document which ultimately forced the government's hand.
Yep.
So a couple of months ago, there was a Senate motion calling for the Royal Commission. The interesting thing about that, it was passed unanimously.
Yep, I remember.
Every senator, regardless of political party. And then they referred that to the lower house within several days. Exactly the same result. It was supported unanimously. So this is the important thing as far as democratic process. A citizen put a petition together over a period of a couple of years. That petition's got a massive number of signatures, getting up towards 500,000 people, and it was supported unanimously by both houses of parliament. So all these various other individuals or groups or so-called ex-service organisations who want to have their say, I don't have an issue with any of them having a say. That's really important and that's very healthy. But where Julianne is coming from is through the democratic process.
Yep.
She has ultimately brought this Royal Commission about.
Yep.
So what she has done, and when the story of how she brought all this about, becomes a bit more public, and I don't know, people might write books about this stuff one day.
Yeah, I hope they do.
I'm not too sure. But she's done an immense amount of work. I mean, for a good couple of years, she was paying for these multiple trips down to Canberra out of her own pocket. And then more recently, you had Senator Jackie Lambie came on board and did some fundraising to pay for her trips. But most recently, when the Prime Minister made his announcement, Julianne said, okay, this is a good result, but I want to make sure we get out of this Royal Commission what we actually need. So we don't get snowed like has happened with previous inquiries. So she brought together what she called an expert panel, and eventually we've called it the Terms of Reference Advisory Group.
Mm-hmm.
And about from the week after the Prime Minister made his announcement, she brought all these people together and said, hey, you guys are going to write a submission. And then we're going to go to Canberra, we're going to brief all these politicians. So we pulled this submission together over, in that same consultation period. Now in this group, we have a really good cross-section of people who are affected by these issues. So there's a number of the other mothers, similar to Julianne. There was a number of ex-ADF people like myself with different backgrounds. So there were some officers in there. There was some, non-commissioned, soldier background type people in there. And we also had, had some academics in there. And then we also had a couple of, there was one ex-ADF lawyer and another lawyer who's got a really good background in all of the veterans legislation and entitlements. So, and within that group, just to give you an example of the caliber of these people, there is one professor, and there are 4 others who either already have PhDs or they're in the process of studying PhDs. I forget the total amount of cumulative ADS service within the veterans in that group, but pretty significant. And these are all people. The reason that Julianne selected these people, she was following them individually and just seeing where they're coming from, and the important part of her decision making process was only to include people who are genuinely independent, who haven't been compromised.
I appreciate that.
Through their involvement, direct involvement, in DVA contracts or stuff like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, so that's kind of the background. So we went down to Canberra week before last, and we had, on the Thursday, we had a whole afternoon where Julianne had booked one of the parliamentary briefing rooms. In fact, it's actually one of the rooms where they do Senate estimates hearings, where the 10 of us and some other supporters of Julianne, and importantly, we had a journalist in there from the Daily Telegraph. We were in that room, and these politicians all came to us. We weren't traipsing around the corridors knocking on their doors.
Okay.
They came to us, so we briefed them. It was our agenda, and we briefed them.
Yeah.
So we briefed the opposition. So Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs, Shane Newman, just purely by coincidence, has been my federal MP for a long time.
Oh, there you go.
And then a number of the opposition MPs and senators. And then we had a group of the government MPs and senators. So we had, that included people like Darren Chester, included Barnaby Joyce, and some of the other coalition government senators. And then we had a brief chat with Jackie Lambie and chatted with some of the other crossbenchers. So that's how we approached it. We did that for the whole afternoon, and that was really constructive, right? It was constructive. So there's a lot of good active listening.
Yep.
People listening to us wanting to do the right thing, but we spoke about the harder edge stuff, right? So we spoke about the need for the Royal Commission to do these. To inquire into this sort of civil and criminal wrongdoing. We spoke about the high level abuse,
Yep.
and that was all taken on board, right? So some of the media stories, in the days afterwards from these politicians, they're little grabs that they'd taken from us, and they
Right.
put them in their own words and said, "This is where we stand."
Oh.
So that was really really positive. A lot of work, and it's pretty draining. Like I find it pretty draining because I've got my own health issues as well,
Yep.
and a lot of us in that group have the same problem. But I came away from that pretty positive. Like we'll talk a bit later on where we go from here, but just from that basis, I'm pretty positive that we're going to get a lot, if not everything, but a lot of what we want out of this Royal Commission. And also during that process, a lot of other people have been doing, actively involved in the consultation process, whether it's, writing their own submissions.
Yeah.
Like I said, I wrote my own one as well. We'll talk
Right.
about the group
Yeah.
submission if we get a chance.
Yeah.
But I wrote my own
That
one
would
as
be
well.
good.
I've been talking to my MP, my senators, and this is part of that consultation process. And
Yeah.
we wanted to. We've never claimed to be representing
Everyone.
the
Yeah.
voice of every veteran, every family member.
Yeah, because that was
You
one of
can't
my.
possibly do that.
That was actually a question I
we
had, is that are there any like lower ranks, like your garden variety infantry, involved in the consultation process anywhere?
So in that group, in Julianne Finney's group, one of the people who's in that group is he's from down in Victoria, and he's from Lucas Moon is his name,
Right.
and he's the president of Hawthorn Subranch,
Right.
and he's been one of the big movers and the shakers in
Right.
trying to reform the RSL and trying to reform Veterans Affairs and so on. He's an ex-soldier, so he's a Timor veteran. He wasn't infantry. He's originally he was a loggy sort of background. I think he was a petroleum operator, like a refueler.
Yep.
And then I think he transferred to Armoured Corps. I think he was like an M113 driver. And I can tell you straight up that right through that whole process, even within our group, he was pretty blunt with us. He's saying, "What does this mean to the diggers? You're talking about all this high level stuff, which is important. I get all that.
Yep.
How does this relate to the diggers? How do we explain this to the diggers? How do we bring the diggers along board with us? How do we give them the confidence that they're going to represent our views? Because we feel marginalised. Like for someone like me, yeah, I can write submissions, I can go and testify at Senate hearings because that's what I feel I'm able to do. But for a huge proportion of the veterans community, whether it's the lower ranks or people of certain lower ranks or their families or whatever, they feel totally marginalised.
Yep.
So we were really conscious about that through this whole process, and this is one of the reasons I'm keen to keep in touch with you and your followers.
Yeah.
Right through,
Look, I appreciate it so much.
when this Royal Commission starts.
Yeah, because it almost feels like
so
it's very complicated, and it almost feels to us like it's we take things personally, though sometimes that we shouldn't, but it's starting to feel personal, like we're being, that most of my friends are infantry and they are feeling kind of shut out of the conversation, when yet there's like important factors that have happened to them, like in Somalia, Rwanda, that were probably down to senior ADF officers. And they're like, when do we get that looked at? When do we talk to you about our mates who couldn't handle what they had to witness because of someone's orders? How can we get someone to listen to Kaz? He's in a good spot. How do we get somebody to listen to what he's got to say?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing that I've been really passionate about for a long time. And from the submissions the one that I made individually and this group one, if they adopt, most, if not all of what we said in our submissions, I'll be pretty confident that the Royal Commission will give people those people
Good.
a chance to have their say, and they'll be supported through that process. They'll be given, the right protections,
Yep.
and so on. But the other thing I want to say is, don't take my word for it, right? If if you're not confident that I'm doing in the vegetable community for such a long time, with advocacy groups
Yep.
not reflecting those marginalised voices, I don't want to be one of those people.
No, exactly. And you've never
I'm
been
really
like
keen
that.
to hear,
Yeah.
today is a start, but as we go through this process,
Exactly.
just hit me up,
Yeah, and that is why
what
you're
you say to me
different.
publicly,
Yeah.
I can't.
Exactly. That's why you're different. And right from when I first met you, you were always willing to hear from anybody and you treat everybody exactly the same. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about you. And I cherish our friendship, really. So, how does this, okay, this is a little bit off topic, but not really. How does this Bernadette Boss and the National Commission fit into any of this?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's where a lot of this confusion has come from, right? So, 18 months ago, after that bushfire season, and the Prime Minister, saying, "Yeah, I'll consider a Royal Commission and I'll come back and I'll make some sort of announcement next year." His big announcement back then was to establish this proposed National Commissioner.
Yep.
And the way that they sold that at the time was to say, this is going to be bigger and better than a Royal Commission. It's going to be enduring, so it'll be permanent, and provide this sort of permanent oversight body that will tackle all of this stuff, a lot of these things. In one sense, it was kind of a good thing. So after this Royal Commission does wind up, I would envisage something like this National Commissioner.
Yep.
Something like it. We'll talk a bit more detail later on if we get a chance.
But, yep.
So in one sense, it was a good thing, but it was actually pretty cynical in how they went about it. When you look at the
I agree.
proposed legislation for this thing, at the start, we already had a Prime Minister making an announcement for something for which there's no law, there's no legislation. Right?
Yeah.
So there's already, the legislation to have a Royal Commission has been in place since 1902. It was one of the earliest acts of our
right.
Parliament. So for the Prime Minister to initiate a Royal Commission, he doesn't need to pass a new law. He just needs to write, draft this letters patent.
See, and this is what confused us.
It was like this big face-saving.
Exactly. It seemed like a Clayton's commission.
This guy was pretty stubborn, and that was, and so there's a lot of these problems. So to get into some of the examples, right? So that little passage that you read out from the Prime Minister's announcement a month ago about the Royal Commission and not looking into civil and criminal wrongdoing, that was verbatim out of the draft bills for this National Commissioner. So already you had the government was ruling out this National Commissioner from looking at what I think is the most important thing. So the positive thing, the pandemic kind of prolonged this stuff, and so normally the sort of things that happen politically in about 6 months are sort of taken like 18 months to pan out. But the positive thing that happened politically is that after the Prime Minister made his announcement on the National Commissioner 18 months ago, that then had to go through this Senate committee process where they look at these bills, they tear them apart, they ask for people to make submissions, and then they make sort of some conclusion as to whether they think it's supportable or not.
Mm-hmm.
That all happened last year. So it happened in like the second half of last year. And that's what gave me the avenue to write that submission that I mentioned before. And we tore it to shreds. And as a result of that, the Senate took the findings of their little inquiry into that proposed legislation, and they opposed the legislation and said this is not good enough. We need a Royal Commission. So that was part of this sort of process. In the meantime, the minister and the government more generally is saying, oh, well, we still want this national commissioner to happen in parallel to a Royal Commission.
Yeah, which I'm not actually upset about. I'm not horrified by that. I think maybe to get both might be better than just one or the other. But it really, it's so confusing to someone like me who doesn't obviously have the understanding, or, you know, I'm not quite as book smart as you, but I you know me, I'm always sending you messages on Twitter like, what the heck does this mean? And I need you to almost translate for me what's happening with something.
Well, even that's a really good point. So even for that reason alone, if it's so confusing that people don't know, like if they've got really serious issues of misconduct or abuse or you know, institutionalized neglect, whatever label you want to put on it, if you're confused about which is the right organisation to go to, well, to me that's saying something.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, well, you know, get a group. And so a lot of where I'm coming from, even like when I wrote my submission to that Senate inquiry last year, I actually looked, I didn't just say, okay, what do we need as a veterans community? I said, right, what do Royal Commissions actually do? How do they actually do it? And I even went and spoke to the people who are running the Disability Royal Commission.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know how you have these, you've been trying to crack a problem for ages, and eventually you have this conversation with someone and they totally get where you're coming from. And they say, oh, this is what you can do.
Exactly.
That was the conversation I had and I was having.
That's refreshing.
With the Disability Royal Commission people.
And
I learned a lot from that. And so I dug into what that Royal Commission does, what similar Royal Commissions do, and how they go about doing it. Right. So a Royal Commission, if they're done correctly, if the terms of reference are right, and if they get the proper resources, if you're someone who's experienced this sort of high level abuse, they support you through the whole process. So it's way beyond anything that this proposed national commissioner could do.
Yeah.
Even by simply recognising that you are someone who has a disability and the needs that you have right from
exactly.
the get-go, or you're someone who is an abuse survivor.
Yeah.
You know, they have, like, right from the moment you contact them, and it might be a 1-800 number, it might be email, might even be responding to a social media post, right? The people who answer the phones, the first people you come into contact with, are trained. They have the right training, and they have the right expertise. They have the right experience. They might be a social worker, they might be an occupational therapist. One way or another, there's someone who's got the right background. So you're not having to, like when I first contacted the Disability Royal Commission people, I said to them straight up, like usually when you contact someone, you know, who's in the veteran space, and it might be someone from DVA, it might be someone from one of the ex-service organisations or whatever, you got to spend half an hour explaining your disability,
just your barriers.
Even me,
exactly.
It took me a long time to acknowledge, because I've got a brain injury.
Right?
It took me a long time to acknowledge myself. Well, hey, I'm actually someone with disability. I'm like everyone else. Like, I don't like harping on about it.
No, exactly.
But that gives
and you don't.
That gives you a certain frame of reference.
Yep,
right?
it does.
What I found when I was talking to the Disability Royal Commission people is I didn't have to waste half an hour doing that.
Yep.
Like, oh, you got a brain injury. Oh, that's good. I've got experience with all these other people.
Yep.
You don't even need to explain it. Tell me what you're going to say, and we'll make it all happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was this huge relief, right? So that's just one little example of what a Royal Commission can do and will do. Yep. Which is fundamentally different to what they're proposing with this National Commission.
It is. Now, look, we're actually almost out of time, but I have so many more questions. Can we get you back next week to finish this conversation? Because I thought we might just nip into the chat and see what everybody's got to say there quickly before we go. Because I noticed that there's a lot of people who are concerned about this. And that is that it seems obvious to us that DVA is possibly compounding the problem with veterans self-harm, things like that. And yet we are very concerned that they are going to be involved in setting the scope or the terms of reference, because to us, we may be looking at this all wrong, but it seems like as if they'd ask the church to set the terms of reference for the Child Abuse Royal Commission.
Exactly.
We don't understand it. We've kind of lost faith in that, and I think that's where Dutton comes in. He's actually starting to restore people's faith.
Yeah.
But Chester,
what
we just
is I'll just spend like a minute or two explaining
that would be great.
where we go from here. Right?
Yeah.
So everything you said to me there, I think is absolutely spot on. These are really valid concerns. Now, the positive thing as of today is that the Department of Veterans Affairs, their involvement in the consultation process is over. So presumably, if you take them at their word, all of the submissions they received have gone to the Attorney General. So the people who actually will be doing the legwork and drafting what ends up in the terms of reference are in the Attorney General's department, right? So now, from where do we go from here? We don't know exactly when the Prime Minister will make his next announcement, but what we as a community need to keep doing is going to our elected representatives and saying, if this stuff that we want included in the Royal Commission doesn't end up in the terms of reference, it's going to be a whitewash. We've lost all faith, and you've got to be really blunt with them, and you'll say, I'm not going to vote for you. Yeah, that's the only language that they don't understand. So there's still time, and it's still important for people to continue to be actively involved in that democratic process.
Yeah, because I would encourage people to do that. And what can those who we've got watching now or on the rerun of this, what can we do to at least, I know we haven't finished this conversation. I have so many more questions. We're going to have to pick this back up. But what can they do to make sure that we are going to be getting what we want and need from this Royal Commission? Yeah,
I would say right here now today, there is still an important window. Now, I don't know how long that'll last. It might be a couple of weeks, might be a couple of months, who knows. But do exactly what I was saying a minute ago. Pick your top 2 or 3 crucial issues that you think need to be included in the Royal Commission. Phone call or email your MP and or your senators and say that, and say exactly that. If these top 2 or 3 issues are not included in the Royal Commission, it's going to be a whitewash. I've lost confidence in you as my elected representative. And I'm not going to vote for you.
And that really...
And that's doable and that's achievable.
And it is frustrating, but it's really how this system works. Now, Stuart, before we go, I always like to end on a positive note, and I ask this of absolutely every guest I have. First, could you please recommend a YouTube channel for my folks to go and check out?
Definitely. My favourite one, in fact, this is really good because these guys interviewed me about 12 months ago on the whole history of where we come from for this Royal Commission. But it's called We Got Your Six. It's run by 2 spouses in Canada. Right. Marge Matchy.
Yep, Marge is great.
Yep. And they post a whole bunch of really good stuff.
Yep. Okay, I'll put a link to that in the description below, just like I will put a link in the description below to your Twitter if people would like to go follow you, because you are one of the best tweeters out there. I find you highly amusing. And as always, I want to thank you so much, Stuart, for coming to our side of the tracks and talking to us, because you may not realise it doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen very often.
You tell me this, and you telling me that was actually a good reminder for me that we need to bring the whole or as much of the community as we can with us, and that includes people like your followers and Kaz's followers and stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly.
I want to continue this dialogue, and I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, for sure.
And hit me up, like if I'm not saying the right stuff.
Oh, I will. I'm not a shrinking violet, just like Kaz knows I will say. Anyway, as always, it has been absolutely wonderful. Oh, I forgot to ask you, Stuart, 3 historical characters that you'd spend an evening with. Go.
Oh yeah, actually, I did some homework on this because remembering people's names is not my strong point. So I picked out 3. First one would be Ord Wingate. He's the fellow who who established the Chindits and led the Allied campaign against the Japanese in Burma.
Oh, great choice.
Second one would be Pompey Elliott. He was one of the first AIF brigade commanders during World War I. His name would be familiar to all of your followers.
Yep.
The other one, this is a bit offbeat, right? His name is Saburo Sakai. And
no, never heard of him.
One of the most successful Zero fighter pilots.
Oh, okay.
The Japanese Imperial Navy in the Second World War.
Yeah. That's great choices.
I could tell you a whole story about this guy and his connection to my family. We don't have time for it. But if you want a good book to read, get his book. It's called Winged Samurai, and it's about his experience of the Second World War right through.
That sounds
absolutely brilliant book.
That sounds awesome.
Make for an interesting.
That sounds terrific. All right, Stuart, I'm hoping you can join me again next week. We'll figure out a time. We'll chat. And thank you so much for talking to us. Yep. Thank you to everyone in the chat too for rocking up and being well behaved. I appreciate it. Love to you over in the US, Jody. I really appreciate you being here. Stuart, Jody Stevens is actually a Gold Star mother from the US who has lost 2 sons, and it's I think she should probably head over to Marge's channel.
Wonderful.
And check that out. And
good to talk to you, John.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you all being here. And I hope you can join me for the next installment of this. This isn't over. We've just begun a conversation. So please, as always, leave a thumbs up below the screen. Subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to ding my little bell for notifications of future uploads, including as we continue this conversation. And please consider sharing this, because there might be a lot of people who are feeling a bit disengaged from the whole Royal Commission conversation, and I don't think they should. So thank you so much for joining me, Stuart. Thank you to chat. Thank you to my moderators. I hope you can join me again at the same time tomorrow. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Okay, bye everyone. Love and kisses. Bye.